I'm on page 9 of our geometry prep packet, and the last thing we talked about was using SOHCAHTOA to solve for missing angle in a right triangle. Okay, so again, I cannot use Pythagorean theorem for this because that only solves a missing side. That doesn't solve a missing angle, so I use SOHCAHTOA. So first, you circle the missing angle. You can put an X there if you want. And you label your three sides. The side across from the right angle is the hypotenuse. The side across from the angle you circled is your opposite side, but I don't need to use that because there's nothing on that side. And the third side is your adjacent side. So you only look at the two sides that are labeled with something. The adjacent side is 13, the hypotenuse side is 18. So that's A and H. That matches up with cosine, the cut in SOHCAHTOA, because it says cosine is A and H. So I'm going to use cosine to solve. And in your parentheses, you always put your angle, which is X. And it equals A over H, which is 13 over 18. Now, you use Desmos to put that into your calculator. And if you remember, you have to go down to your keyboard under Functions and under Trig. Now, when you're solving for a missing angle, you have to click the one with the -1 next to it. So I'm going to click on cosine of -1, and then I'm going to type in that fraction, 13 over 18. Now, because I've gotten out of Desmos and gone back in since last time, the setting didn't save. So you're probably going to have to go over to your wrench to the far right. And again, make sure the word degrees is highlighted. And that'll give you the correct answer. So it's 43.8 if I round. 43.8 degrees is the angle. Now, remember I said if the smaller number should go on top. If you were to flip these around on accident, so 18 over 13, it'll tell you it's undefined, which means it's not possible, so that's probably what you did wrong. Now, the only exception is tangent. Like if I change that to tangent, it's still going to give me an answer. So tangent, it doesn't matter the order, but cosine and sine, the smaller number always goes on top. And again, it has to follow the order that's written. So because the cut was A and then H, A has to go on top, so 13 over 18. Question 2 is kind of review what we did beginning of the packet when we had like an introduction to SOHCAHTOA. Now I made a typo again, so I have to change this around. I'm just flipping the 10 and the 20 because I want the 20 to be my longest side, which is my hypotenuse. So when it just says find sine of B, like there's no X anywhere. I'm not trying to solve for X. I'm just writing out the fraction. So sine of B means I circle the B, and I want sine. If I go up here, sine is opposite over hypotenuse, so O over H. So looking at B, the side across from that is the opposite. The side across from the right angle is the hypotenuse, and the third side is the adjacent. So again, I want sine, that's O over H, so 10 over 20, and you don't have to reduce it. Now cosine of B, so I'm still looking at B, so all these stay the same, but now cosine is A over H, so that'd be 15 over 20. And lastly, tangent of B, still looking at B, but now tangent is O over A. That would be 10 over 15. So if it's not asking you to solve for a missing angle or side or X, you just write out the fraction using SOHCAHTOA. Now we're going to move on to solving for a missing side again in the right triangle. However, we cannot use Pythagorean theorem to solve this because the Pythagorean theorem only works if you have two sides and you're missing the third side. In this case, they give us one side. They give us an angle, but an angle doesn't help us. So you cannot use Pythagorean theorem, so we're going to have to use SOHCAHTOA. And I think that's going to be a question on your exit ticket or your quiz or somewhere in there. It's going to say, why can't you use Pythagorean theorem to solve a triangle like this? Well, that's because you need to have two sides in order to use Pythagorean. Pythagorean only works if you have two sides and you're only missing the third side. So to find this side, I'm going to use SOHCAHTOA. They give me the angle 25, so that's what I'm going to circle. The side across from my right angle is my hypotenuse. I'm not going to write that there because there's nothing on my hypotenuse. The side across from the angle I circled is my opposite side, so X would be the opposite side, and the third side would be the adjacent. So I'm only looking at O and A because those are the only two sides labeled with something. The hypotenuse has nothing on it. So if I'm looking at O and A, I have to see if that matches up with sine, cosine, or tangent. Well, O and A matches up with tangent. So that means I'm going to use tangent this time. And again, the angle always goes in parentheses, but this time the angle is actually 25. It's not X. And then the fraction, it always goes in the order that's written, O and then A, so that'd be X over 10. Now, I can't just put this straight into Desmos yet because X isn't by itself. I have this 10 down here, so I have to get rid of this to the other side. Since 10 is being divided, I want to do the opposite of that, which means multiply it to both sides. So that way it cancels out. So on your left-hand side, you have 10 times tangent of 25 equals X. Now that X is by itself, you're going to put that right into your calculator on Desmos. So I'm going to type in 10 tangent of 25 in parentheses. And it tells me it's 4.7 if I round it. Now a few things. I didn't put the -1 with the tangent because you only do the -1 when you're solving for an angle. In this case, I was solving for a missing side. So I did not have to put the -1. I just type it in exactly how it says. And I don't have to put degrees with it because, again, we were missing a side this time, not an angle. All right, let's do this one down here. So there's where my X is. I got to use SOHCAHTOA. I'm going to circle 46. That's the angle they give me to label my three sides. Across from the right angle is my hypotenuse. Across from the angle I circled is my opposite side, so 8 is the opposite side. And then the third side is the adjacent, which I don't need in this case because there's nothing written there. So O and H are the only two sides that are labeled, so I got to figure out what O and H matches up with. If I go to SOHCAHTOA, O and H matches up with sine. It's sine, and then this is O and H. So I'm going to use sine this time of 46. The angle always goes in parentheses. And then it's O over H, which is 8 over X. Now again, I can't just put this right into Desmos because X is not by itself. Now if you know this, this is different than the one we just did. The one we just did, X was on top. This time, X is on the bottom. So when X is on the bottom, you're actually going to do 8 divided by sine of 46. This is how you want to put it into Desmos. And again, that only happens when X is on the bottom. So again, it has to go in the order that's written. It's O and then H, so that'd be 8 over X. So if I type that in, I'm going to delete this out, and it's 8 divided by sine of 46. That's 11.1, so X is 11.1. And again, I'm not putting the -1 with the sign because I'm not trying to solve an angle. Sorry. I was doing this smoothly. Okay. Got it. There we go. I'm not trying to solve an angle, I'm trying to solve a side. All right, let's do one more. I'm going to circle 23, that's the angle. The side across from my right angle is my hypotenuse, but I don't need to write that there because there's nothing on the hypotenuse. But if you did it, would it be wrong? I'm going to draw an arrow across from the angle I circled. That's my opposite side, so X is the opposite side, and the third side is the adjacent. So in this case, I'm only looking at O and A because those are the only two sides that are labeled with something. If I go up to SOHCAHTOA, I'm going to use tangent again because tangent has O and A next to it. So tangent of 23 equals, it's O and then A, so X over 6. Now, X is on top this time, so all I have to do is multiply 6 so I can get X by itself. So I have 6 times tangent of 23 equals X. Now that X is by itself, this is what I'm going to type into Desmos. So I'm going to delete that out, and it's 6 times tangent of 23, 2.5. So X equals 2.5. Okay, so that is basically kind of just a run through of using SOHCAHTOA to solve for angles, and we can use SOHCAHTOA to solve for sides.